My name is Christy Rojas, and today I will discuss Philip D. Heron's book, Hurricane Camille, Monster Storm of the Gulf Coast. Heron's book highlights the stories of 15 survivors. His stories focus on the people. He wanted to capture an understanding of what they will be doing the days and hours before landfall, the ordeals during the storms, and the actions they took in the aftermath of one of the most monstrous storms. He highlights throughout his book the resilience of the Mississippi Gulf Coast and their ability to bounce back and overcome. At the time of Hurricane Camille, the Mississippi native Philip Heron was living in Birmingham working as a news reporter. Not being in Mississippi, Heron says he had a difficult time comprehending the true nature of the destruction. While he visited the shores of Mississippi after another storm came through, he had a difficult time imagining the destruction of Camille and what it had been like. Camille's story had lingered on long after, and in 1989, he discovered a collection of oral interviews of survivors. The reporter felt compelled to share the stories and experience with a wider audience. Through his book, he details the accounts of 15 survivors, each story similar, yet so very personal. While his intent is to share the stories of the survivor, he does a fine job of sharing the history of Mississippi Gulf Coast and the history of hurricanes. A fun facts that I learned throughout the book about hurricanes is first, the name hurricane, which today's word we use, comes from the Mayan and storm gods. It is believed that the first human record of Atlantic cyclones is depicted in the Mayan hieroglyphics. However, it isn't until the Spanish began to settle North America that we see documentation of hurricane events recorded in history. Columbus even wrote about it in his encounter with a hurricane. Benjamin Franklin was an early innovator of the storm study. Through observation and study, Franklin was able to track the progress of a hurricane from North Carolina to New England in 1749. Hurricanes, while destructive in nature, serve a purpose. And without hurricanes, the tropics would be too hot and the poles would be too cold. The swirling motion removes the heat from the tropics. Camille slammed through the Gulf Coast in the summer of 1969. Camille was the second recorded Category 5 hurricane to hit the United States, with winds clocking at over 200 miles per hour and destroying everything in her path. She left 131 dead and 41 missing, later proclaimed dead, for a total of 172 in Mississippi. Those from Mississippi refer to their time there as either BC or AC, before Camille or after Camille. Today, if you drive along the Mississippi Gulf Coast, you will still find some areas that have never rebuilt from the storm. Camille didn't stop in Mississippi. She moved up through the United States, causing devastation in Tennessee, Kentucky, West Virginia, and finally causing historic flash flooding in Virginia until she finally made her exit into the Atlantic Ocean, leaving a path of destruction behind. Harrison County had been hit with a pretty intense storm just 4 years prior to Camille's landfall. They had learned many lessons, including when to activate the county and state EOCs. As Camille entered the Gulf of Mexico, as was normal procedure, they issued state of preparedness and activated the EOC to a level of monitoring. The storm would take a quick turn, families refused to evacuate, and many even scoffed at authorities' warning of the storm. Mississippi was found in a state of compliance. As officials begged with those in areas of 20 feet elevation to leave, they heard tales of compliance. Many even planned hurricane parties because they brought out the last storm and they could survive this one. Throughout the book, Heron shares the stories of many families. These stories are personal. Some did in fact try to evacuate. He shares of families who stayed in their own home or those who evacuated to churches. And when they realized that they weren't in the safest spot, many tried to move during the storm. Heron details the stories of individuals who refused to leave, who become trapped in attics, and use their antique furniture as boats as their only way of survival. In the aftermath of the storm, after families watched loved ones get swept away, he highlights the struggles of the days following, still trapped in the houses, missing pets, no food or water, sunburned and beat up, Many had to choose to leave their household pets behind, search for their possessions, and seek food, shelter, and medical attention. Harrison County had been hit with the largest storm of its history. And while some changes prior to the storm that hit just 4 years before had changed, Camille proved that there needed to be stricter guideline structures and requirements to push back structures from the shoreline. While the author doesn't agree that much has changed post-Camille, I'd have to disagree. Post-Camille, evacuation maps and flood zones were revised and released. One-stop survivor centers were created, which we still use today, known as our DRCs. And while for many, Camille is just a distinct memory, because of Camille, insurance and flood insurance guidelines were changed. The County of Harrison and the nation as a whole makes an effort to inform residents of their evacuation routes and flood zones. And one of the largest things to come out of this storm was the advancement in both meteorology and science. The better understanding of this storm allowed for an advancement and change in the days following. Now that Camille has been almost 50 years, I have to agree with many others that it is now a distant memory, but Camille set off a chain reaction of policy and planning changes that have carried on to today, including public education, better evacuation routes, and overall a better understanding of storms.